I'm Alexa with the Clinicians Atelier and founder of Care Identity, and I'm super excited. Dr. Maryal Concepcion on our podcast today, who typically is always interviewing others on My DPC Story, and I'm so excited she chose to be on our podcast today.
No, it's such an honor to be here. I have so loved being a friend of yours and, a supporter of everything that you do. And also I loved how when I met you through your cousin, Dr. Kissy Blackwell, as well as Dr. Leah Gupta, it's been amazing to see your work since then. But then even recently, I was geeking out over your, it was like a yin and yang neural brain logo. And I'm like, hashtag talented right there, man. So I was so excited to be here.
Oh, I know that everyone's always sharing their story, and I'm kind of excited for you to kind of share your story from more of a marketing perspective. And what I've appreciated about you since I've met you is you definitely have that creative eye. And I know we've talked about it personally since we do know each other on a more personal level. But with that being said, I really think there is so much in your story of you starting your practice, your journey, and you DIYing everything, and it turned out great. And so kind of sharing your journey with others that might kind of find some alignment there. We've talked about it before, but, there's always that question, do I DIY? Do I, hire somebody? So let's kind of start a little bit in the beginning. Tell me a little bit, ultimately, what pushed you to start your practice and what was that process like? And then to when you first opened?
There's a few things that I think about in terms of my own journey to being a DPC practice owner and doctor. And one of those things is that I do not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I joke sometimes that everybody in Sacramento works for the state. Nobody knows actually what they do, but everybody works for the state, and they go walk around in their tennis shoes at Capitol Park every day at lunch. And so for me, I was very much okay, I go from medical school to residency to being an employed physician. There's no other thought in my mind at the time. And the other thing too that I think about is that my entire life, I was the person who designed the school musical program. And I did my entire Jostens medical school class yearbook, the entire book I designed minus the headshots that Jostens put together, right? I remember doing my newsletters for Key Club. Being creative has always been something very fun for me. When I was looking at direct primary care as the way of the future, before I had left fee-for-service, I was never intimidated about marketing in particular. It was a very fun thing for me because that's open book of whatever I want to do. Let's do it, try it, and then go from there. So I definitely would say of the business part, it's not the thing that scares me the most, and it never has been. And when it came to opening my practice, I remember those 3 days, literally the 3 days before I opened. I remember recording one of my messages on my phone tree at 2:00 in the morning. And then someone was like, "You recorded that at 2 a.m. You sound so peppy and normal." And I'm like, yes, I do. Thank you so much. I remember the excitement and joy and making sure that I could tie up loose ends as I would need to on my website. Links go to the right place. The colors are matching. The fonts are all Montserrat. I'm a huge Montserrat fan. Listening to people, hearing about their journeys that impacted my marketing, but also knowing that I was going to open as a home visit telemedicine model only. To start really made it about, okay, I have my website. I was I just need a website so people can find me, and I need a way of taking care of them with an electronic medical record, way of communicating with them, way of billing them. And then I have my small community where I know exactly who to tell. And I had also had about 60 days where I was being asked, where are you going to go? And I was able to give my arnolddoctor.com as my lead gen capture page, landing page, where people opted into following my location and opted into me sending them communications after. And so when I opened, I had prepared for zero patients and $0. So it wasn't that stressful financially, thankfully. At the time I opened September of 2021. My youngest was almost a year. So I had this like quiet kid, and then the other kid was at home, but it was very doable with no patients. Like it's fantastic when I opened. Yeah. So that's a like that's what I would say is my answer to that question in terms of like what impacted me in terms of my marketing, intimidation or lack thereof, and then getting to open.
So tell me a little bit. I didn't know you originally started as home visits and telehealth. And I've actually seen people ask this question in groups before, how to do that for the listeners. You're Maryal in California. Do you mind if I call you Maryal? Because I feel like we're friends. So I don't know if everyone else does.
You always do, so it's all good.
I often see people ask about that process, like especially in California. I see people like, can I do telehealth? I know there's a doctor in San Diego that does home visits and virtual. So tell a little bit about how that looks like for you as you began to bring on more patients. And at what point did you feel now I need an office?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, Dr. Dipti Mankor, who you're referring to, my happy doctor, is an amazing person. She is absolutely one of my heroes. She opened before me and she is doing great. When you have a home visit model, telemedicine visits on top of that, people stand out in terms of like, oh, like you're also doing this. Like I want to know a little bit more about you. And so one of the things that definitely is talked about in terms of when you look to a home visit telemedicine model only is how many patients can you actually have, because a home visit takes longer than an office visit. Even if you like are doing a suture removal, it's like you still got to pack up your stuff, and it's not just like on the shelf where you open the cabinet and you go. You have to be prepared to do certain things. So I would say that it was within the first, I would say maybe like 6 to 8 months that I knew I wanted to have a space, because there were certain things where I'm like, I had been to the Dominican Republic in medical school, and I have done gynecology on, whatever for us to set up clinic, like gym bed, people's actual mattresses in bedrooms that were isolated just for gynecologic exams for the clinic. But this would be like in a person's home. And so, like I'm very scrappy when it comes to what's the job that needs to get done. How do we do it safely, sterilely, properly, all of those things. But it's like the place in which it occurs, like you can get pretty creative with like, if you don't have a light and you need to get in a window to see someone's skin lesion better, you get creative. But there was a point definitely where I had enough patients where I would say probably 40 patients into 60, somewhere in there, where I was like, I think this is where I cannot drive to, like multiple houses all over our expansive county every single day and be able to, do things effectively. There were definitely times where it was like, oh, need to do a pap smear and forgot the thin prep, or, the actual broom to do the thin prep. So it's definitely doable. And people like Dr. Dipti Mankor and Dr. Cindy Rubin and Dr. Andrew Wadley are, amazing physicians who continue to do home visits and telemedicine. But for me, I knew that I loved procedures. I knew that I loved the ability to be like nimble with whatever needed to be done, whoever walked in my door. And also because I'm family medicine, like Dr. Rubin and Dr. Wadley are pediatricians. Dr. Munkor is internal medicine. But me, I'm just like Jane of all trades, love to do everything. Like, absolutely, we can do an excisional biopsy while you're here. Why not? And so I loved the ability to just be nimble with a physical space.
So you said you were maybe around 40, 60-ish patients, give or take. And you said that was over about 6 to 8 months. Is that kind of like where your patient panel was when you made that transition into the office? And my other question would be, how many of your original patients came with you? And did it take you about the full 6 to 8 months to actually build that patient panel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So for our practice, I would say that 80% of the patients who became my patients were already my patients at the former clinic. My very first patient who joined was, and this is pretty much what I saw, was like, oh, I just hadn't gotten around to it, but like, I think I'm due for a physical and like, I don't want to see anybody else. So like, where do I pay? Like, it was not, it wasn't a big journey for those patients who had me as their doctor for almost 6 years to be like, even in fee for service, like I don't actually know what this is, but like I know that you're the only person who's actually treated me like you actually gave a crap. And not to say that the doctor before did not, but it's like that's my summation of the responses that I would get from my patients as to like why they valued my care. Not to downplay the former physician, but it's like I appreciate that like it's not a struggle to understand what DPC is. That was not my journey. My journey was like where like them remembering that they like needed to sign up. It's like when you have a subscription that you need to cancel and you're like, oh yeah, I got to do that. And then you remember on the opposite end, they wanted to subscribe and they just forgot to do it. So I would say that my patient growth was like, I think the first month I had maybe like 1 to 5, something in there. And then I experienced like the ebbs and flows, like totally that happened to me. And it definitely happened, I would say, at certain times of the year, like when people were needing a doctor because they were sick, really prompted them to sign up. So I saw people really remembering to sign up when it was that they needed care, like they were having an acute illness around, cold flu season, not necessarily because it was tied to open enrollment time for Medicare, open enrollment. So sometimes I would have 2 in a week, and sometimes I'd have 0 for 3 weeks. And so it definitely was, not like your cousin, Dr. Kissy Blackwell, 278 patients on day one. But, it was this time where I was mentally, and I still am, but it was like a very big mental space for me to just like get over the treatment that I had in fee for service and just to like relax. Because when you don't have to do the, 6:15 to 8 p.m., even though you're being paid 8 to 5 journey anymore, it was like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot of things that like I can reevaluate.
I want to set realistic expectations because I make websites and then later I'll check on my clients. And sometimes they're discouraged because they're not seeing like these outrageous numbers or this crazy growth. So that's why I'm kind of asking these questions to kind of help people realize like what different growth could look like.
I became familiar with scheduled emails on Google. I think it was very prosaic at the time in terms of like my website is built on Wix. They do have a CRM there, but like you can only use a certain amount and like the ability to craft your message and the graphics and whatnot is very limited. So I definitely would say that like I went through this journey of like, okay, I want it to be, colored templates and trackable links and all this stuff. And then it was like, you know what? I'm not doing anything because I'm held up by the, need to be perfect. And so I ended up doing some templates on Google, just the native Google email that I had. And I had a Google BAA for Google Suite to Google Workspace, I guess now it's called. So I did have some templates there, but it was very manual at the time. I did have help. I did have a person who I no longer work with. I would say I worked, I think, 17 months with that particular company, a virtual assistant company that was supposed to be helping out with that. But it was still a lot of like me participating in like, providing the history of like, this is how I would talk to this patient. These are the questions I would particularly have for this patient. So there was still a lot of involvement, even though I did have a virtual assistant at the time helping, coordinate meet and greets and whatnot.
So just to kind of put things in perspective, I'm going to jump forward a little bit. What is y'all's current patient panel? And I know your husband now has recently joined your practice. And so tell me a little bit, what is your personal patient panel? And again, and then how long did it take you to build that?
Yep. So I actually have still around, I think, 60-ish, maybe 70-ish patients. And I intentionally have my practice small because I have the podcast and I just opened, we're really getting into the DPC directory being really a usable tool. And I'm doing things in terms of speaking on behalf of the autonomous physician who lives in DPC and exists in DPC and who can thrive in DPC. And so intentionally, I would hear other people's journeys 3 to 5 years in, and knowing that 600 to 800 patients is a full-time panel, and looking at what I had, and if I had doubled that, like what would my life look like if I had double of the clinical work? And then also knowing that, especially in the last year, because for those people who aren't aware, my husband, who's also a family physician, he was let go from his job because the law in California changed such that a nurse practitioner with 4,600 hours of supervised care is basically a physician. They don't have to be supervised if they meet certain requirements. And that can be a new nurse practitioner, like graduated just from online school. And so for me, it was very scary and sad when the corporation made the decision to eliminate the physician's role. And my husband was out of a job. And so he has, I would say, probably somewhere like 40 to 50 patients. This is a little over a year into the practice. And it's definitely been a very big change for him, because I would say, like, of the two of us, and he's very aware of this, he won't get offended by this, but like, of the two of us, I'm the more entrepreneurial type, and he's more of the like, I'm fine, just like, what are the rules? Like, let me in my lane and I'll follow the guidelines. And not necessarily like the person who's thinking about marketing and design and CRM and all of these things. And so his growth has definitely been the second wave, I would say. Like, after that 50 patients, it's very much the like word of mouth. Like, all right, so I've tried. Like, he had the two avatars. Like, I've tried to do it the insurance way, and it's just terrible. Like, I need my doctor back. And then I actually closed my panel to, other than to like kids and pregnant women. And it's still closed to this day, just because I don't want to like increase that spigot while I'm still like, helping with my husband and just re-envisioning the clinic in terms of like how workflows are going, that type of stuff business wise. And so he's still really getting into, oh yeah, like, I can actually work this up. I can reach out to the virtual option in terms of getting my patient care or whatever it is. So he definitely is much happier, but I would say neither of us really went crazy in terms of like Facebook, Google, targeted zip code advertisements and even to this day, because we're not necessarily the clinic. It's not the clinic goal to have 600 to 800 patients right now. Our sons just turned 7 and 4, and it's like, that's a lot right there. Like, that's a lot. And then to be wanting to just like look at workflows, make them more efficient, even just like marketing, like what happens when a person clicks on a lead gen and like, what's the follow up? I mean, you can chat GPT it all day long and do that, but then like, it's actually, I do like having the time to think about things rather than just like, oh, chat GPT says it is, so it shall be, so that's what I would say is like our current status and why.
Two things you said that I want to point out. When you said it's not the goal of the practice to have 600-700 patients. And second of all, you do a lot, but outside of just doing a lot, one thing I've learned by the different clients that I've been worked with, everyone's goal is different. Like, some people may be happy with 100, 200 patients. Some people may be happy. I mean, my cousin has like 700. I don't know how she does it, but my point is, I've said this in a couple of podcasts, so I'm going to say it again. You need to define what success is to you and what you are comfortable with. Because I think sometimes we're chasing, society has told us what success is, and not necessarily, like, maybe time and freedom is more important. Being able to be there for your kids, maybe being able to invest the time in the other endeavors that you have versus feel like you have to be at the practice all the time and you can't do anything else that you are interested or enjoy. And so I definitely want to point that out, because I do speak with people sometimes, people that aren't even my clients. Sometimes, I have discovery calls and I'll hear things like, oh, I'm just not very successful. I don't have that many patients. I only have like 40. And this person over here has like 200-300. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I think what happens is when you start looking at the other person, and what I feel like someone should be asking themselves is, am I comfortable? Is this sustainable for me? And can I continue doing this? And if not, what can I do to grow? And if you are happy, don't look at what someone else is doing as your base of your level of success.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I mean, it's just like how we think about lots of things. Like comparison is not going to necessarily do any good when it's comparison that you're not fill in the blank enough, capable, you're not creative. And I mean, all of the things that are not celebrating you for you, it puts a person in a dangerous spot, especially when it comes to the world of entrepreneurship. Because in DPC, I think about foundation of everything. We are running small businesses, and the customers are our patients, our members are our patients, and they're investing in us as physicians. So there's really nothing to compare to when it's like they're not comparing you to, the next person. They're literally seeking your care out because you do more cardiovascular care, because you see kids, because you, whatever it is. But I think it definitely is something that I love celebrating on when I do interviews of DPC doctors, is the individuality of every single one. And I love, I think that Dr. Sonia Singh was the one who said, she was really intimidated to do DPC because she didn't see people like her. And she saw like a single avatar of who a DPC doctor was. And then when she saw diversity in the people that I've interviewed, she was able to see someone like her. And so I think that it is really important because there is no one like you. And that's what our patients want. They don't want, like, it's just another corporate physician or non-physician provider who just stepped into the room. Like, they want personalized medicine.
That's what I try to tell people is normally when people hire me, I create very personalized brands, but I didn't even realize that's what I did. During the discovery process, I would hear things like, oh, I like how their site's very, personal to them. And so I started realizing not only because the relationship is personal and people are choosing to work, not so much with your brand, but with you, because in a way you are your brand in DPC and any small business, because people were tired of the corporate. I mean, now when I look at these websites, because I started running stats recently, because I redid my website and I had to run stats. And I went to look at my clients' websites and they had higher conversions, longer read time than average, because it was engaging the audience. And that's what you want to do. These corporate websites, they're there to create traction. Like if you actually read the websites, they're giving you definitions. Like who wants to read a definition on what a heart attack is? Like, obviously, we know what a heart attack is. I know what a heart attack is. I'm not even a doctor, but that's how they write these websites. That's how marketing agencies typically write these types of websites to gain SEO traction. But it speaks nothing to the person you're trying to convert, and they don't really care because they know you. They take your insurance, and they're like, "Oh, it's okay. I take your insurance. Just come to my practice." Versus when you're in DPC, you're now selling like, I actually want to help you. I'm not here because you're just a number. I'm here because I really want to see you healthy. I really want to take the time to get to know you and get to the root causes. As a person that's been a DPC patient, ultimately, that's where I was surprised when I sat down. I'm not going to lie. When I first decided to finally sign up, I was like, being self-employed, I was like, man, can I budget this every month? Be transparent. And then when I first went and I got to sit there for 30 minutes to an hour and really explain and talk about everything, and they checked everything and we talked about things, I was like, yeah, no, I don't think I want to cancel this, because it's when you see the value that you've never had anywhere else. But we're so used as the patient going in for 7-10 minutes, 5 minutes, being rushed out or never really getting to talk about everything because you can only talk about that one problem that day. And so when you see the difference, that's what people want to read. They want to know, what are you going to do different than the person that takes my insurance? Why do I want to give you my money every month? And so that's where I think people really need to also think about in general is you're saying, it's a personal relationship. People want personalized care. And especially because you've interviewed so many people, I'd be interested to hear What advice would you give to people that are first opening based on all the interviews that you've had?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it echoes like what we just talked about in terms of like, never forget why you're doing this and never forget that there's nobody else out there like you. And I think that those are the things that are sometimes lost. Like, why are we doing another Medicare physical? Why are we showing up at our 8 to 5 jobs? And who are we at the end of the day? Those things get lost in DPC. So I think that that's like the biggest thing that I pull out from the interviews as a whole is that here are people, here are our colleagues who are saying, you know what, I do still have me at the end of the day. And, not to say that like people don't have souls in fee for service, but at the same time, I think it's the honoring of who you actually are. You can honor that a lot easier in DPC because you have the time to do it. You have the time to like block your schedule. When it comes to the uniqueness of every doctor, it really highlights over and over in all different sorts of cases that like the autonomy is really a foundational part of direct primary care.
I'd just be curious what your thoughts are, because I know you've interviewed so many people and I know people have closed or sold practices and whatnot, but I want to focus more on people that have closed. Based on what you've known of these individual practices, what were some of the reasons why you feel, or maybe were told why some of these physicians and practices chose to close? I know some people say they wish they could hear more about the struggles and the failures in DPC that no one really talks about. And I just know based on your insight, I'd be curious what that looks like.
Yeah, so I would say like it falls in different buckets. And for me, I think that, especially for DPC doctors, even like right now, I think about in this question, people who are looking to retire. And it's like, I think about that, Dr. Julie Gunther said this, she said it in her Patreon episode, but it was like, she really talked about how messed up it is that like, we go to medical school and then you're off to take over the world. You're off to give back and see patients. But nobody ever talks about like, when can you actually stop being a doctor in terms of seeing a person in the clinic? And so I think that, it really goes back to like, what is the like reasonable expectation for a physician? Because in medicine, we are under usually a lot of stress because we're wearing the stress of our own lives. Then we have to go to clinic and take care of other people's issues, chronic diagnoses, problems, concerns, dramas. And that's what we signed up for. So like, I'm not complaining about that part, but it's like the reality is that it's very difficult, especially in the way that healthcare is run this day and age, to have a career for as long as like my mentors did, because when they opened, there, may not have been HMOs, or they know that there's a few more years left in their practice before they comfortably retire. But especially for younger physicians, or people who have a single source of income that is their clinical career, it can be scary to think about, oh, there's people who've closed. But I think that there's sometimes people who fuel the flame of like, oh, you're a failure, or like, oh, like you did something wrong. Doctors who have closed their practices, and on the My DPC Story episode Mapper, there's like a filter that says like practices who like where the doctors are tired or closed. And it's like Dr. Doug Farrago was done. Dr. Philip Olshausen was like, I just wanted to go do more stuff. Like I usually stay in a job for 6 to 7 years, and that's just how I am. And it's like, and the thing that I look at in all of these physicians, even those who've not been on the podcast, is like, they're still alive. I mean, clearly, like, it's really terrible when a person gets a medical diagnosis and that's the reason they have to close. But in terms of when I say they're still alive, it's like these people are not hiding in shame under a rock and embarrassed to be alive and embarrassed about their career in DPC. If you opened a DPC, even if it doesn't work out, like Dr. Whitney Webster Pack, one of my favorite interviews ever, was she's like, you did it out of love. Like you did it out of love for yourself, for your patients, for your community. And if it doesn't work out, you're like, okay, what are you going to do next? But it goes back to also mindset and coping and value of yourself as to how you like look at these and listen to these doctors who have gone on from DPC, and it is okay. Like that's the biggest thing I try to get out in all of these interviews of especially doctors who have, chosen to no longer do DPC. It's going back to the fee for service system because financially that's what is going to need to happen. Great. Like you have a different perspective and you have exposure that if you needed to go back to DPC or diversify your way of doing your medical career, you have more skills than you ever did when you were only a fee-for-service doctor. I try not to use the word failure. I try to use like they are either open or they closed or retired, because to me, it's like they're still Dr. Farrago, they're still Dr. Olshausen, they're still Dr. Whitney Webster Pack. And they made changes. They made an impact in the lives of their patients for the time that they were in their DPC.
I think people need to kind of reframe that thought of you're not a failure. One thing I will say, just as an entrepreneur myself for 15 years, I say it this way. I've had to adapt over and over and over to survive 15 years self-employed. Especially, I went 100% self-employed in February of 17, like forever. I'm kidding. In 8 or 9 years, I don't even know. I lost track. But my point is, the amount of times I've had to get creative to survive and to look at the way my market is changing and what my target audience needs, and like having to come up, like I built the DIY course. Why? Because for the last 2 years, I've seen more and more people wanting to DIY. I built, a different type of template system to give people more diversity. Why did I have to create these things? Because I saw a shift in what my audience needed. And so sometimes I think it's not that I've ever failed. I've never thought I failed. I think I've just had to get more creative every single time to be able to stay in business. And I think that's something like we don't really talk about enough, is like adapting, constantly having to adapt as a business owner, seeing how to grow and change. What are some other things you can do or other services you can provide? So I think that's like a great way to put it. It's not necessarily that we're failing. I just think either you, like you said, you do it out of love for a period and you move on to something else, or you have to like learn to adapt to keep growing. You have to invest in yourself to keep growing as a professional. And so I just think that's like something I want to like put out there. I wanted to kind of say, what advice would you give to somebody? Because I know you DIY'd getting everything started and going. What advice would you give to someone that is getting started or they just started? The question of, should I hire someone? Should I do it myself? What would you say to that person that might be kind of like wondering which way to go?
This is a lovely question. You and I had done, do you DIY it? Do you, hire a professional mastermind? But when it comes to DIYing, one, I would say, look at like, does the decision that I was talking about, like when it came to being an entrepreneur and marketing and like all of the things, does it make you want to die or does it make you excited? Like that would be like a branch point for sure. After that, I would say like if it doesn't put you down that I want to die pathway, or if you are in that I want to die pathway, but you're still open to trying, then I definitely would say try. But I would also say, try while being educated. That's exactly why we recorded a mastermind all about this. But it's really like there are so many resources about direct primary care and about marketing and direct primary care. I mean, your Facebook group, this platform, like there's so many options out there for people to learn about like what things should you start with. It's like, okay, like as you're sitting there, like start with easier things, like what colors do I not like? What colors do I like? Is there a particular name that I'm leaning towards? Like the branding part, I think is a lot more palatable for people who are like, not really sure. But it can also be fun. And then when it comes to the technicality things like designing a website and stuff like Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, I mean, those things are so easy. Like you do not have to have a degree, and it might not be super professional because you're not a professional if you're doing this, from like a hobbyist perspective, which I would put myself more in. But it's like, if you play around with it and then you're like, I literally just put 18 hours into finding the place to add a button and then another 6 hours to add a link to that button, and if you're okay with that, great. If you're not okay with that, another branch point, like maybe I should hire someone. And there's always the, like what I'm highlighting there is there's always the branching points. Like you go as far as you are able to and are capable and comfortable with. And then if you're not okay, that then you start questioning, like, is this the right path for me or not? And this happens with everything, just like you were saying, like how many times have you had to adapt? I mean, like I'm doing that right now in my clinic, like with my husband and more patients on board. I'm like, this workflow ain't gonna work any longer. So we got to rebuild this. And it's like with the ability to, have the time, do you want to have that time and utilize it on your business, or do you want to hire a professional to like, help you with the design of your CRM or your like how to make your tech work for you. I guess I would say that because there's so many things that applies to. But this is where consultants come in. I'm frequently asked like, specific questions about what do you do about like preparing to open when it comes to using an EMR? What tips do you have in creating a social media campaign? And, it's like, for me, these things are not making you want to die, then it's like maybe it's okay to try DIY. But if you get to a point where you're like feeling more stressed or feeling more like this is not comfortable, then definitely time to think about like, hey, Alexa. And I say that just because you have an amazing sign. This is like one of my favorite things. So I have many that are like in the shoot about to be launched. Different lead magnets for different populations, but I think this is where like again like all of the dopamine starts going off at the same time, and it's like, all right, so I think with lead magnets definitely it's like standard things are standard. It's like, the lead magnet is what we would say is top of the funnel, like something to attract somebody to you as a brand. And then as that lead magnet is going out, then what do they get next? Like, is there something else that comes after? And so I think this is where, if you're going to do lead magnets, you really need to think about like what is after the very top first step of the funnel. Because if you have a person like Dr. Jeffrey Schuckman, whose website you designed is an excellent example of this. His White Olive DPC site has, I think, like 2 lead magnets. But, it's a great example of when you have something on aging and you are in a patient population with a lot of geriatric patients, Medicare eligible by age patients, that is something great to have. I mean, that's what we found. One of the things that we're talking about is my ability to titrate Miralax is like groundbreaking when like no one's ever said you can titrate Miralax. The need in my community in this example is like aging population, the people who are helping take care of that aging population, especially with dementia, are not sure where to go. And so this is where you can get creative. Just with the idea of lead gen, you can go down the rabbit hole of like, I'm a small business. Am I woman-owned, rural, Filipina? Yes. I can work with grants through getting small business administration opportunities to like pay for my ability to develop a lead magnet for the community. And then with that money, doing things like having actual nice printout things to be handed out at an event where older people might go to in person, as well as have a downloadable PDF that has a trigger that sends a person down the next step of the funnel. But like that can be followed up with, and you can intentionally like think forward in terms of, oh yeah, so I know that I'm going to have a handout on constipation. So I'm going to talk about constipation, not medical advice, not your doctor, but generally and have that available as the next step of the funnel in print form, website form, podcast. Like all of these things are what I love thinking about. So like it does not intimidate me. It's just like, I think the biggest frustration is for me is like, I can't go fast enough. My fingers cannot go fast enough. And so, but this is where like, you can use AI, you can use ChatGPT, you can talk to people like yourself, you can hire a consultant, or you can try, and if it doesn't work, you try again a different way. There's many ways to approach the idea of lead magnet. Like I could talk all day on lead magnets. I love them.
It's really funny. There's so many things that ran through my brain in that moment that we were speaking. But so one thing is, if it is too much, that's why I created the bare wireframes, because it's so easy to just like change up the colors, put in your font, pop in your pictures. super easy. And then it comes with the course. So like when you buy the bare wireframe, I created a bundle where it includes the whole DIY course. So you can learn to write your copy. You can learn to do your logo with AI. And it's really cool because I just interviewed a trademark attorney for the podcast that really explained how all this ties together. But the other thing, when you said if the button takes you 15 hours to like find out where to put it, well, I was laughing because people end up hiring me, watching me edit stuff. And they're like, you do that so fast. And it makes me think of this story of an artist where they charge thousands of dollars. And the guy's like, you did that in 10 minutes and you charged me, like, let's just put a number, $10,000. And he's like, yeah, but it took me a lifetime to figure out how to do it in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, that is such a good perspective, though. Just like, I could never be a doctor. I'd probably puke if I saw blood. Like, that's just not what I was just not meant to be a doctor. But, I love designing. And so it's like one of those things, like when doctors talk to me in medical jargon there, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you're saying. Like, that's me like talking to you about color palettes and like other things. And you're like, what are you talking about? So I do think that sitting down, I did just release a book like within the last month or so I guess now it's like the last couple of months, called Brand Personality. And it literally talks about how your colors and your fonts are a silent marketing team and how do people react to that. So those are all really good things. And you can get a free copy of that book. One thing when you said get really creative, you need to solve a hyper specific problem. So instead of trying to like throw all this stuff into one book or one ebook or one pamphlet, think of a very specific thing, kind of like you said, a very specific hyper-focused thing that would speak to your audience instead of trying to put so much into it, because that's going to attract more attention than trying to be more broad and do more of a blanket statement. I'm so thankful that you joined today, and I'm super excited to share your story with everybody. And thanks for being on.
Absolutely. The pleasure is mine. So it's always wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already checked out Dr. Maryal Concepcion's podcast, it's called DPC Story, where she interviews different DPCs throughout the US, talking about their stories and why they started. Also, as you heard through today's episode, the awesome marketing strategies and ideas and lead generation digital marketing angles that Maryal shared with us, along with the freebies that I have available. So you can download those from our website at thecliniciansatelier.com. We also have our Clinicians Atelier Sales and Marketing Academy that just launched this month. We focus on how to brand yourself, how do you reach your audience, how can you lead generate, how can you do sales. I have 20 years in sales and marketing and design background. And so I decided finally this year to create a place and a space for physicians, clinicians, and therapists to be able to go and learn ways to be able to attract leads, how to nurture them, and how to ultimately sell to your direct audience. If you haven't checked that out, it's all on the website. I hope you find a lot of value in today's episode.